I'm Abby. I am brand director for Bums on Seats, and I'm joined today by our CEO and founder, Amber Staynings.
Hello guys. Hi Abby, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So we're just going to chat a little bit today about Christmas. So obviously we are in the thick of December already. I think what we wanted to talk about is obviously a few things that operators can still do to drive a bit of pre-booked, and how you can also kind of start setting the foundation for January, February as well. So Amber, what quick wins would you say operators can still do to get any of those last minute bookings, and can it still be done?
Well, I think that's a really good point because quite frankly, we're sat in, mid-December. So the majority of your bookings should now be in and confirmed and secure with a deposit. And I need to make that caveat first and foremost. But there are things you can do. What we are focusing on now as we're running up to the last couple of weeks of Christmas is everything around your smaller bookings. And there's almost those fillers in. So it's a really good time, number one, to review your system, look at all of your table joins, look at your seating times, your turn times, everything, and do a little heat map by day of where you've still got capacity. And that's really important. And if I was an operator, I'd be doing this exercise at the moment, literally every couple of days, 2 to 3 days. It sounds quite a lot, but it's really worth it. And make sure that that's reflected in the customer journey online when they're trying to book. So that's first and foremost, because your booking system will now do a lot of your work, because it will be smaller groups that are booking, and you don't want to be turning people away, because that extra group of 4, 5, 6 people, especially that low hanging fruit, which is your peak booking time, could be the difference between your like for like sales growth. So get those last minute bookings and look at your system optimization. I think the second thing, if we steer away from trying to proactively sell Christmas now, because quite frankly, outside of your marketing and digital strategy, which is absolutely fundamental, do not stop doing that. Be bold, continue to sell your business right until the end of the year, and make sure that your messaging and your call to actions are amending depending on the time of year. However, you're not going to be making really proactive new business calls for Christmas bookers, because they should have booked. So focus on your spend per head. Really, really important. Who can you upsell to? Put some little sort of power times in your business where there's a focus, whether it's if you're lucky enough to have a salesperson, but if not, if it's someone on front of house, where you can give them a list of some key bookers, some key groups that they can call and say, what would you like to book in advance? What can we do to increase your spend per head? And add that value in those packages now, because they'll spend more when they arrive. And actually, even if you're not getting more covers through the door, increasing value and spend is super, super important, as we know. I think the other bit I wanted to talk about is everything around your guest experience and your rapport building, and why that impacts so much your last minute bookings, and then therefore what happens next year. So if you are making sure that you have built rapport with all of your Christmas bookers, if you're lucky enough to have those big scale events, when's the last time you picked up the phone to them? Have you reconfirmed all their details? Have you made sure that the group size is still the group size? There's not going to be any drop off. Do they need to up their numbers even, which again will only add more covers into your overall Christmas performance? So that's a really important bit. Don't forget that personal interaction that you have to have. Booking systems one thing, but people still buy from people. So that's really, really important. And then the last thing, which could work for you or could not, because I'm really pulling at straws at this time of year to think of things creatively that we can do. But what I would say is, if you have got a significant amount or a decent amount of lost business where for whatever reason the customer didn't convert, or you thought you were full, or you were holding out that space for other bookers, look at your data and look at when that business was lost and when it was inquired for, and there may be some nuggets of there of people that you can still convert at different times, because even if they couldn't get their time and date they wanted, they may come back with a smaller group before the end of the year, because if they've inquired with you, there's a desire there to come to you. So don't dismiss business that you haven't won. You could still get that business to book, just maybe not on the same date, time or size of booking.
Amazing. Some great tips there, Amber. Thank you. I think the one on rapport building is really key as well. I think sometimes it can be very difficult in December when it's so busy and things like that, that kind of focus on rapport building can drop off. But like you say, it is so important, especially going into January, February.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just not about being robotic, Abby. I think a lot of us get quite robotic this time of year, where it's like, we've done this, it's all a bit checklist, tick box. But actually just remembering that if you have the time to do that extra step to be memorable, it goes a really, really long way.
Yeah, it really does. So another thing that I wanted to ask you about today is obviously rail strikes. So I know we had kind of tons of them last December, and I know there are some this year, not as many as last year, but it's still, according to UK Hospitality, going to cost the industry about 800 million this festive season. What kind of tips would you give to operators to sort of, I mean, you can't combat them, but kind of to deal with them as best they can?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, every time I hear about rail strikes, I just want to say many, many expletives of my actual feeling around the selfishness of this, and the fact that it's still going on over a year later at this time of year is a disgrace. So I have zero sympathy or empathy for them, and I'm sorry if that's controversial. But what can we do? Well, obviously there are elements in our industry, as we have known for the last 3 years, in particular 4 years, that are completely out of our control. But what is in our control is a number of things. I think something that we know about consumer demand and behaviour is flexibility. So as much as it is piss poor and horrendous for you as an operator, from a guest perspective, and I am this person, unfortunately, because I live out in the sticks outside in Surrey. Obviously, I have a child. So when the rail strikes happen for me, it does genuinely impact me getting into London. But if I had a reservation and the restaurant, pub, bar, restaurant was really empathetic, understanding and flexible with my rebooking, then I would visit them again. And it's a feeling because that, you know, we understand that. So be really flexible and understanding and allow your guests to rebook. And although that will impact that day-to-day sales, actually the longer term relationship, I talk about this a lot now, Abby, the lifetime value of your customer is far more important than that just one booking. So that's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing is, again, I mentioned it earlier, but this I really want to see bold, obvious, transparent marketing messaging around this. So let's be bold. You know, we know rail strikes are happening. Please still come and visit us. What can we do? And even as far and above that, another idea I had, and I don't know if anyone's doing this, and obviously this is not at your peak time, but if it's happening at potentially an off-peak time, what value added can you do to entice the guests to still make that trip? Now, if it was a huge group booking, for example, I would be as bold as to say, is there even like a taxi you can pay for the CEO who's struggling to get in? I mean, if you really think outside the box, is it that there's additional drinks that you can throw in, stuff that says this booking on this date is really important to me as a business, we really want you to still come? What can we do to help counter the rail strikes that means that you will make the effort and find other ways to get in? And again, it might not work, but if you think that it's worth it on some of those days, then it's worth a shot, isn't it? All you can do is ask. I think, again, the idea of calling the customer on those days, reconfirming the bookings over the phone. There are brilliant examples of really successful, I won't mention who, but high-end dining businesses who are, you know, incredibly successful that still call every single guest before they arrive. And then I get these excuses from Pubco, and we're too busy, we can't do it. I think, well, if you can do it in a restaurant that's turning over 400 covers per seating and has a queue outside the door, then I think, you know, there's a way where we can even cherry pick and call the bigger groups the day before and have that conversation. Because one thing I know which impacts sales growth is drop in numbers. So at least you're countering that, and you know that that's happening, and therefore you can sell the space to walk-ins or last minute bookers or anything else. So that, again, that one-on-one interaction where you can is really important. And then the last thing, which I'm hoping everyone has already done or is doing, is the more you can tie your guest in with financial commitment in advance, so packages, upsells, then the less likely they are to mess you around. And that's really important, because if you secure a packages for X amount of people, even if 10, 15 people don't turn up and it's prepaid, you know you've got that money in the bank. So I would suggest, and that's something that you hopefully most operators have thought about months ago, but it's not too late to try and implement that, especially for things like New Year's Eve. Christmas Day obviously generally is a very local market, so it's quite different, but New Year's Eve is far more destinational. So I'd think about that in terms of New Year's Eve as well. I'm not suggesting rail strikes are happening on New Year's Eve, but it's just a really good caveat to that commitment of the guest, whether they're not coming because of a rail strike or whatever it is. But yeah, I think just be bold, go for it, and be flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's key as well is just to acknowledge them, because I think it is that thing of just being aware, yeah, they're happening on this day, calling your guests and putting that messaging out on socials, and like you say, trying to be bold and maybe trying to be a bit memorable and have a bit of fun with it almost in your messaging on
Yeah.
socials, to kind of just acknowledge it, and rather than trying to pretend that they're not happening.
I think you're absolutely right. The worst thing you can do is do nothing. And
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
with all things that we talk about in terms of sales growth, it is activity, obviously the right activity at the right time, but doing nothing is the worst option.
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's a great takeaway. Is the worst thing you can do is do nothing.
nothing exactly.
So obviously we know as well January and February are going to be coming around sooner rather than later, and we know obviously there's such a difficult time for our industry. So we know that obviously venues are going to have so much footfall coming through the doors over the next sort of few weeks, and they will have had over the previous few weeks as well. How can operators and venues utilise that additional festive footfall to support January and February, those cold and dreary months?
Yeah, I think look, we rely on December in a lot of businesses because it's where you can make the most profit. And the view is that if you have a good Christmas, you have a better Q1 or whatever your quarter land start to the year. And there's obviously that's right. You couldn't disagree with that. And everybody will be doing on some level, especially if you're in the restaurant sector, some sort of bounce back offer that should be promoted to your December footfall to get them back in January, February. And that's done and dusted. And whether you're using that through something like Toggle and a loyalty scheme, or whether you're doing that actual physical POS within your business, all of it again is stuff we should do because we know it works. I guess my challenge is, so what? And what I would like to see is a bit more innovation around what we're doing in January, February, because yes, they're difficult months, but if we look at two things, if we look at what is your local business reputation, your local loyal guest, and how are they still coming to you through January, February, versus who are all the new customers that you picked up in December, and how are we enticing them back in January, February? Actually, the two strategies are probably different, but what we tend to do as a business, as an operator, is we put in one strategy and expect everybody to buy into that. So I would say you need to do more, and think differently about the different types of customers and demographics. Utilize your data, because if you've got the natural footfall, how are you capturing their data when they're in your venue? So making sure they are going through your booking system, they're getting Wi-Fi data, all of that stuff is really important. Identifying who is your loyal customer, who's visited you more than once, or more than 2 or 3 times in the last 3 months, versus this is the first time they've come to you, and you can offer them different things. We know from retail, and we are slowly catching up, and we will be even more catching up, I'm sure, next year and the years to come, because we have no choice, and it's the right thing to do, that personalization is everything. So rather than just expect a free burger for £1 to drive every single guest through your door, think smart, think differently, put the time in with your strategy to do that. And some will be spoken to through digital channels, some will be spoken to through POS in the venue, and some will be spoken to through actual rapport building and relationship, because it's a big booking. You've had a booking of 100 in. Every single person in that booking is a potential repeat guest. So how do they know what your offer is and how you want to get them back for next year? And again, this isn't about seeing it as a standalone discount. It's about seeing it as a strategy to drive frequency of booking and guest loyalty, and that's the difference.
Yeah, it's about kind of added value, and I think as well it's key to kind of know your guests and be authentic and stick to your brand as well. Like, I think, don't do something that isn't what your USP and stuff is kind of aligned to, because that's kind of what your guests are going to want. And I think there's always that really good example that people talk about, and it was Turtle Bay did a campaign in January a couple of years ago through Airship using Toggle to their database, and they got a £10 Toggle voucher when they made a booking in January. Super simple, but obviously they did it through a CRM system with a really seamless guest journey of redeeming the voucher and making a booking, and it resulted in almost like 8,000 bookings. And I think it's crazy, and I think that's an example of just how you using tech as a way to do that January campaign in a really seamless way that is going to genuinely make people book as well.
I think you're absolutely right. Tech is the future, and I think the only caveat to that is that every customer still wants to be spoken to in the way that they want. So tech's one method. POS in the venue is another method, a phone call is another method, an email is another method. And actually what we have to do is understand what the guest wants and then do all of it to the right person at the right time. But it's a brilliant example, Abby, you're absolutely right. It just shows what can be done with a bit of thought.
Yeah, exactly. It shows the opportunity, because I think that there was that many people that were willing to book to go to Turtle Bay in January. So it shows that the opportunity is there if you just go about it in the right way and you know your audience, and you add some value to them, then you can get those bookings in January.
Hell yeah.
So to finish us off, Amber, can you give us 3 quick fire tips, actions that operators can do now still to maximize Christmas pre-booked sales?
Yes. Okay. As you all know, I'd say 10 words for one, but let's make this really quick. So
I should get like a countdown.
I know.
Countdown counter.
Yeah. No, I think booking system, constant optimization, understanding of your capacities versus what you've got open, where you can squeeze people in, 100% is number one, because that's capturing everything on your website and your web traffic. I think number 2 is everything around that guest experience bit and rapport building, because it doesn't matter how busy you are, and whether the guest's in front of you or over the phone or in advance or on an email, that you don't dismiss how important that is to help with Christmas now, because it could be that they book twice for you in December and they come back with their friends for just 2 people. So that every single guest and customer is really important and can book again in December. It's not just one-off booking, it could be 2 or 3 bookings. And I think the third one, I think it's about keep marketing, keep being bold, keep shouting about it, keep saying you've got space, keep saying have some fun with it, keep your call to actions really relevant. And actually, there's a quick one. I'm seeing very little still around New Year's Eve and Christmas and stuff like that, and that's worrying me. So, you could flip. I know it's only one day, but that's still in this financial period. So again, think about all those other occasions and things you can talk about.
Amazing. Thanks, Amber.
No worries. Thanks, guys.